Ghana has long been seen as a leading example of democracy in West Africa. For many years, it has proudly worked with ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. But now, Ghana might take a big step that could change the entire region, leaving ECOWAS altogether. This decision is not just about Ghana's relationship with the organization. If Ghana does leave, it might inspire other countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger to come together in a new group called the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Such a move could reshape politics, economics, and security from the southern parts of Africa all the way to the Sahara Desert. To understand why this decision is so important, we need to see how Ghana got here in the first place. Ghana has always been a key member of ECOWAS, supporting regional unity, shared markets, and peaceful cooperation. Ghana's leaders spoke often about pan-African values, meaning that Africans should work together, stand proud, and solve their own problems without too much outside help. But as time has passed, many in Ghana have grown unhappy with ECOWAS. They see broken promises, slow progress, and heavy outside influence. Now Ghana is thinking seriously about going its own way. One of the main reasons for this frustration is that ECOWAS seems too close to Western countries, such as France and the United States. In theory, ECOWAS was formed to unite African nations and let them solve their own problems. However, critics say that it ends up following the priorities of foreign governments. This is especially clear when it comes to political crises. For example, when there are coups or other changes in power, ECOWAS quickly applies sanctions in some cases, but not in others. Military takeovers in Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso were met with strong punishments, yet leaders who changed their constitutions to stay in power in countries like Ivory Coast faced little or no serious response. Many Ghanaians think this is unfair, and that it shows how ECOWAS acts based on what big foreign powers want, rather than what Africans actually need. Ghana also worries about the economic side of things. ECOWAS once promised a bright future, with plans for a single currency and expanded trade, but these plans never really happened. Meanwhile, Ghana's economy, which has grown a lot, did not get the full benefits of its ECOWAS membership. Ghana had to rely on trade agreements and foreign aid that often favor outside powers instead of supporting local businesses. This created extra burdens for Ghanaians, who wonder why they should remain in an organization that does not deliver on its economic promises. People in Ghana also point to the example of other countries, especially Burkina Faso and Mali, that have decided to act on their own. These nations have chosen different paths, often disagreeing with foreign governments and working to develop new structures for themselves. Watching Burkina Faso and Mali stand up for themselves has encouraged Ghanaians to believe they, too, could succeed without ECOWAS. That's where the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, comes in. This new group wants to break away from heavy foreign influence and emphasize true African independence. Unlike ECOWAS, which is often seen as being swayed by big Western nations, AES declares that its main goal is to empower African countries to make their own decisions. AES members want to control their own resources, set up markets among themselves, and strengthen security through local cooperation. This idea closely matches Ghana's hopes of achieving self-reliance and freedom from external control. With this in mind, Ghana sees AES as a promising alternative. If Ghana leaves ECOWAS, there could be serious consequences for the organization itself. Ghana has always been one of its strongest voices. Without Ghana, and possibly without Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, ECOWAS would become weaker both militarily and politically. More importantly, many would question whether ECOWAS is still relevant. Does it truly serve the people of West Africa, or is it mainly a channel for the West's interests? Critics argue that if ECOWAS loses these significant member states, it might not have enough influence or purpose to go on as before. To understand why some people think ECOWAS has failed, we can look at its original goals. When it was created in 1975, ECOWAS promised to help West African countries cooperate on economic and political issues. Leaders planned to introduce a common currency, open trade routes, and link the region together with better roads, energy networks, and telecommunications. They also wanted to help settle conflicts peacefully so that civil wars and violence would not spread from one country to another. Yet after almost 5 decades, these goals remain largely unfulfilled. The common currency is still in limbo. Trade barriers exist, and many West African countries rely on older relationships with former colonial powers. Infrastructure is underdeveloped, and different governments rarely come together to fix these problems in a united way. One of the biggest symbols of foreign influence is the continued use of the CFA franc by many West African countries. This currency is tied to the euro and controlled by French financial authorities, which means local economies are not really free. Critics say that ECOWAS has not done nearly enough to break this colonial link. Countries that still use the CFA franc remain stuck in systems that prevent them from forming truly independent economic policies. Ghanaians look at this situation and realize that by staying in ECOWAS, they might be stuck with a structure that keeps the region closely tied to external interests. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have already expressed their anger over having to rely on foreign nations for security. These countries face serious terrorist threats and armed groups, especially in remote regions. In the past, they sometimes turned to outside armies, like the French military, for help. But this form of assistance often led to complicated results. It did not always solve the underlying issues, and it sometimes led to tensions with local populations. Moreover, ECOWAS did not effectively offer a strong African-led solution. Therefore, these countries began to look at new ideas, such as forming a safer, more coordinated group of their own. This is one of the reasons the Alliance of Sahel States has gained momentum. AES aims to rewrite the rulebook on African security. Instead of looking to foreign interventions, AES believes that by pooling the efforts of its member states, sharing resources, strategies, and intelligence, regional governments can maintain safety themselves. Countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have found that working together on security operations can be more efficient than waiting for foreign forces to step in. This strategy also extends to the local population. AES leaders have talked about involving local communities in security decisions, making sure that villages and towns have a say in how their areas are protected. This is a major shift from ECOWAS's approach, which has often relied on big, top-down decisions, sometimes influenced by Western sponsors. Another crucial difference between ECOWAS and AES is how they deal with resource management. Many West African nations have precious minerals, oil, natural gas, and other raw materials. Historically, foreign companies have mined these resources, but local communities have not shared much in the benefits. Critics argue that ECOWAS has done too little to change these deals. They say that ECOWAS should have helped countries gain more control, ensuring that wealth from minerals and natural resources stays in the region to improve roads, education, and healthcare. Instead, foreign corporations often take the lion's share of profits, while only a small amount of revenue is left behind for local budgets. AES, on the other hand, is focused on resource sovereignty. It pushes member states to renegotiate mining contracts and other extraction deals to give Africans more control over their own resources. This plan appeals to Ghana, which also wants to ensure that the gold, cocoa, and oil it produces benefits Ghanaians first. If AES can create a new model that keeps resource profits at home and invests in local development, it might become much more attractive to Ghana and others who feel tied down by ECOWAS's slower approach. These changes highlight a broader shift happening in Africa. Many African countries are run by younger leaders who want to finally leave behind the colonial-era ties and rules that have shaped their nations for too long. Leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso represent this new wave, speaking openly about limiting Western interference and allowing local voices to decide what's best for their citizens. In Ghana's own history, figures like Kwame Nkrumah championed the idea of pan-African unity, African nations working side by side to chart their own destiny. But can Ghana's potential departure from ECOWAS spark a lasting movement that transforms West Africa? That depends on whether AES can stay focused and deliver real benefits. If Ghana leaves ECOWAS and joins AES, other countries might follow. Yet building a new bloc is a huge task. AES must develop its own frameworks for trade, resource management, security, and other areas that ECOWAS was supposed to handle. If AES's leaders fail to create practical solutions, or if they end up repeating old mistakes, people may decide that the new alliance is simply another empty promise. ECOWAS is not necessarily doomed. There is still a chance it could reform, cut down foreign influence, and commit to serious changes that benefit its members directly. But many observers doubt that the organization can change quickly enough. After all, ECOWAS has existed for almost 50 years, and throughout that time has often moved slowly and hesitantly. If Ghana leaves, the pressure on ECOWAS to improve might intensify, or perhaps the organization will lose so much credibility that it simply cannot remain the main regional body. This is where the bigger story lies. Africa is at an important turning point, with many people rejecting old ways and seeking real independence in politics and the economy. More than half of Africa's population is under 25, and youth voices are calling for change. Technology is helping them communicate across borders, raising awareness about how policies are decided and who benefits. Leaders like those in Mali and Burkina Faso are pushing a vision of self-reliance that resonates with this young generation, who want Africa to stand on its own 2 feet. Ghana, with its proud history of democratic practices and strong civil society, is well placed to push for these new values in West Africa. If it leaves ECOWAS and helps form a strong AES, Ghana could play a key role in shaping the alliance's systems and goals. People who support this idea say Ghana would be continuing Nkrumah's dream, but in a modern setting, one that suits the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. However, moving away from a major regional bloc always carries risks. If Ghana leaves ECOWAS, it might lose certain trade privileges or face diplomatic tensions. Trade routes would need to be renegotiated, and disagreements could erupt if certain ECOWAS member states decide to retaliate. Plus, forming a new alliance like AES involves creating many institutions and forging new agreements from scratch, which can take a lot of time and resources. Countries might face short-term confusion about trade rules, currency matters, and immigration policies while new arrangements are worked out. Another worry is how Western countries might respond. They have interests in West African resources and markets, and they want to keep military bases or partnerships in certain areas to fight terrorism or protect investments. If Ghana and others challenge these arrangements through AES, they might meet resistance from these external forces, perhaps in the form of economic pressure or limits on aid programs. This has happened before when African countries attempted to step out of the usual alignment with Western powers. At the same time, there is a strong feeling among Africans that relying too much on outside help has stunted the continent's growth and led to a cycle of dependency. This is why the phrase African solutions for African problems keeps coming up in political speeches and everyday conversations. While outsiders may be needed for certain things, like advanced technology or specialized training, many Africans now believe that the final decisions should always be made by Africans themselves. AES is a manifestation of this principle, and Ghana's potential membership would give it even more weight. What will the future hold if Ghana actually leaves ECOWAS? One possibility is that ECOWAS tries to quickly repair its image, promising major reforms. It might move faster on the common currency, crack down on constitutional abuses, and distance itself from foreign control. If it does, Ghana might reconsider. Another possibility is that other nations see Ghana's exit as a signal to do the same. Then AES might gather momentum, with more countries joining, and soon it could turn into the dominant alliance in West Africa. A third scenario is that we end up with 2 competing blocs, ECOWAS on one side and AES on the other, both trying to prove they are the real future for the region. In any case, West Africa is at a crossroads. People are demanding real change, whether that's less corruption, more economic fairness, or freedom from overbearing foreign powers. Leaders must decide if they will fight for these changes within the current system or break away and form something entirely new. Ghana's possible exit from ECOWAS is a clear sign that even strong democracies can lose faith in old institutions if they do not see the benefits they once believed in. This makes the role of everyday citizens even more important. By staying informed, voting for leaders who prioritize local interests, and speaking up when something doesn't work, the public can help shape the policies that affect them. This is why social media and youth engagement matter so much. People are demanding solutions that align with African realities, not just with what foreign donors or outside nations want. If Ghana leaves ECOWAS, the conversation about how Africa organizes itself for the future will intensify across the continent. And we invite you to share your thoughts on this major development. Do you think Ghana should leave ECOWAS for a fresh start with AES? Are you worried about the risks to trade, diplomacy, and security? Or do you believe it's time for African nations to take stronger steps toward full independence from outdated systems? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this discussion, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you're joining a community that seeks to empower Africa and strengthen its voice on the world stage. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates, and let's keep spreading knowledge and hope for a more self-sufficient Africa. In conclusion, the debate over Ghana's position in ECOWAS is more than a local political issue. It symbolizes a broader shift happening in West Africa, and indeed across the continent. Many people feel that post-colonial ties still hold African countries back. They want to build new structures that really serve African citizens, not foreign powers. Organizations like AES might be the first step toward this new era of control over natural resources, fair trade, and strong regional security. Whether Ghana stays in ECOWAS or leaves, we are witnessing a time of big choices and big changes. The outcome will shape not just Ghana's future, but the fate of millions of people in West Africa and beyond.